Hi, everyone. I am Jade. I'm a summit leader of this CIFPAC summit. And I'm going to give a minute or so to let people trickle in before we have our accessibility video.
And while we're getting started, if everyone can start introducing themselves in the chat, it'll be great for us to know who's here in the room.
It's early. I feel like more grace is needed in the AM hours.
Especially on a Friday, right?
Facts. Very much so. Okay. Welcome, Amy. Okay, we'll give them 1 more minute. Okay, so just to jump into the extremely important things, super upfront, other than who I am and why we're here, CIFPAC is trying to organize and co-develop, facilitate, and advocate for implementations of policy to advance food justice all across Chicago and the rest of the region. But in order to make that possible, we have to make things accessible. And in order to do that, we have this short little video that will kind of get you familiar with the options here on this platform, as well as the accessibility options offered by Socio. We have Carmen here interpreting in real time. Thank you so much, Carmen. And after this video, you won't be seeing me much, so I'm going to leave you here with your lovely presenters, and I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Hello, and welcome to the 17th Annual Food Justice Summit. My name is Enrique Orozco, and I am one of the co-organizers of the summit this year. Before we start your session, I want to highlight some of the accessibility options, engagement features, and explain how to access interpretation services. Hola, y bienvenido a la 17ª Cumbre Anual de la Justicia Alimentaria de Chicago. Me llamo Enrique Orozco y soy uno de los coordinadores de la cumbre este año. Antes de empezar, quiero tomar un momento para indicar las opciones de accesibilidad, las herramientas de participación y los servicios de interpretación. Para acceder a los servicios de interpretación, fíjese al lado izquierdo de su pantalla. Al hacer clic al botón que dice Audio Captions, se abrirá una ventana. Haga clic en Select y luego elige el lenguaje de su preferencia, inglés o español. Comenzarás automáticamente a escuchar al intérprete. Para acceder a los servicios de subtítulo, elige el botón que indique CC. Se tiene que elegir una de estas opciones. Para escuchar a los presentadores, elige la opción Floor. Se puede cerrar esta ventana. Finalmente, deberás silenciar el video principal para no escuchar a los presentadores e intérpretes. Estas opciones también se pueden encontrar al lado derecho de su pantalla, bajo la pestaña que dice Interpretación. To access interpretation services, look at the left side of your screen. By clicking on the Audio Captions button, you will open a window. Click on Select and then choose which language you would like to hear, English or Spanish. You will automatically begin to hear the interpreter. To turn on closed captioning, click on the CC button. You will need to select one of these options. To hear the original speakers, select the floor option. You may close this window. Finally, you will need to mute the main video in order to not hear the original speakers and interpreters. These features can also be found on the right side of your screen under the Interpretation tab. The platform also offers a number of visual accessibility tools. To find them, click on the profile image at the bottom of your screen, and then select Accessibility Adjustments. You can also change the language of the window through this pop-up. Under these accessibility adjustments, you can select different options to make the website easier to read. We welcome you to participate in the conversation through the chat window. Clicking again on the Chat tab on the right side will open up this screen. Select the box at the beginning to begin typing into the chat. At the end of the session, we will open for a brief question and answer portion, and you may type your questions here. Afterwards, I invite you to open the polling tab to answer a very short survey that lets our team know how well we did in planning these sessions. I hope you enjoy the 17th Annual Chicago Food Justice Summit. I will now turn it over to your speakers.
Hi, everyone. We are so thankful to have you here. Thanks for coming to our session. We named it the Community Elevation Through Food Distribution, Redistribution. And we would love it if you could introduce yourselves in the chat. Many of you have already, and it's great to see friends here. Thanks for coming, Lucy, Julie, Micah, and so on. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to hear your voices due to just existing technology, but we hope that monitoring the chat will allow us to have an interactive conversation. So please, introduce yourself now and just keep the questions rolling so we can really try to make this more interactive than a presentation. So today we will be addressing the environmental and societal flaws of the food system. I know this is something a lot of us feel strongly about. We're asking the question, how do we build collective care into the system to elevate community? And I won't go too deep on the challenge, digging into the data, but food insecurity amidst the quantities of food waste that are out there should be criminal. 30 to 40% of all food created for consumption in the United States is wasted. And it's not just the food. People have heard me say this before, but all the resources used to plant, grow, harvest, transport the food, it gets on the shelves, we take it home, and the wasted portion goes to a landfill where it decomposes and releases methane, a greenhouse gas over 20 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So we're talking about an environmental disaster that is avoidable. But even more, heartbreaking than that is the food insecurity affecting more than 10% of Americans. And here locally, according to the Chicago Food Equity Agenda, in late 2020, 19% of the Chicago metro region faced food insecurity. And that figure is closer to 29% in Latino communities and 37% in Black communities. So what we're talking about today is the opportunity to redistribute hundreds of millions of pounds of fresh food to address food insecurity, food justice, and support the health of our most vulnerable community members. And the numbers are staggering. The Chicagoland Food Sovereignty Coalition looked at community needs and identified, this is going back to during the pandemic when we had food boxes being provided through the USDA, but it allowed us to capture some data, and 22,000 food boxes per week and 12,000 prepared meals and another 2,000 non-food bags being distributed. Those were, the needs identified, and less than 25% could be fulfilled. So that's at least a few million pounds of food we're talking about per year. And then hundreds of organizations nationwide trying to address this. Again, hundreds of millions of pounds of food that could be redistributed. I want to make the point about wasted food not being one man's trash. It's not that. This is an asset that can be directed to community organizations who are working without capital to serve neighbors in need. Without capital, and then you've got this wasted food there. This is, again, we consider it an opportunity for food rescue to address food insecurity and not passing out expired leftovers. What we're trying to do and what we're talking about today is correcting a flawed system, changing and creating change to fix operations across industries that procure and serve food in each and every community to promote circular economy and elevate access to food, which many of us feel is a human right. So I say that to help set us up for the discussion, but now we're going to really get more specific and talk about what's happening in the Chicago area and what we can all do to be a part of the change. So we've asked you to introduce yourselves in the chat. We'll quickly do the same here. My name is Stephanie Katsaros. I started Brightbeat, the company that I lead, in 2009, and we're a consultancy addressing improved resource management across sectors, but also a lot of passionate work and advocacy to reduce waste and drive systematic change. You could read my bio, but I won't bore you with any more details. I'll pass it to Marisa, and then she can pass it to Moses. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. And that was a great introduction to what we're going to have a conversation on. So, hey, everyone. It's been so great to be a part of this summit. My name is Marisa Martinez. I'm Mexicana, and I'm proud to say that I'm first generation here in the US. So my connection to food justice is my father's experience with food insecurity. So my dad was from a rural town in Mexico, and he would go fishing to feed himself and his siblings, and fishing would also help him with money. So he would sell fish in the plaza to have things to go along with the fish when they were cooking meals. So because of that, food justice is personal to me. And I'm excited to share a little bit more about me and the work that I'm doing to help extend community care in a way that is helpful and collaborative. So in a nutshell, I work for a company that distributes food to grocery stores. We have large-scale warehouses across the country and have a huge network of stores that we're distributing to. So because of how big my company is and how widespread they are across the US, I find it extremely important to be intentional with any food that may be getting wasted. So I'm working really hard to minimize that. And with that, I'll pass it to Moses.
Hello all, lovely to be here with all of you today. My name is Moses. I use they, them pronouns. So my connection to food justice started at Roosevelt University, and I see we have a couple alumni in the chat. So there I studied sustainability studies, where I became more familiar with different sustainability issues across the board. And the area that really stuck with me was, developing sustainable food systems, and also just looking at how issues like food insecurity specifically affect certain populations and demographics more than others. So it was this specific topic that pushed me to further my education. So I just finished my MA in food studies and MBA from Chatham University in Pittsburgh, where I focused my thesis research on how food insecurity specifically affects people of color that also identify as a sexual and or gender minority, or LGBTQ community for short. And really what I found through that research was that one, these voices are not represented in emergency food spaces like food pantries, food banks, etc. And, in addition to that, this community is disproportionately affected by food insecurity. So I, sought out to find out more about this and to build some suggestions that existing food organizations can use to make their spaces more accessible and affirming for this specific population. And through this research, I actually found my current employer. So I'm currently the Community Pantry Program Manager for Brave Space Alliance. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're in a Black trans-led LGBTQ center in Hyde Park. So the Community Pantry is just one of many services that we offer. We offer support groups, gender affirming spaces and services, employment justice services, amongst many others. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you to be speaking more about my work.
Thank you both. It's very clear that this work comes from the heart and the desire to do good and do better. So I just appreciate hearing your stories, and want to start with a talk around collective care and what that really means and how you're able to connect it to the work that you're doing. You were inspired to do it and you landed at Brave Space Alliance and at KHE. And I guess, Moses, beginning with you, how does the work of Brave Space provide collective care to the community? The means and also how you find the right approach.
Yeah, of course. So Brightspace aims to provide expansive resources and services to BIPOC, queer, and trans communities in Chicago. So like I mentioned before, we recognize that this community in particular has been deprived of life-sustaining resources and opportunities to connect with members of their own communities. So with this in mind, we have very strict or just very like explicit values, strategic initiatives, and a mission that we're not afraid to share with others, and we stand by it as well. So all of our programs and resources revolve around three strategic priorities, which include health and wellness, visibility and expansion, and then bravery and solidarity. Um, and to give a little more background to the work that I do in the community pantry, I want to touch on a report recently published by the Williams Institute that examined food insufficiency amongst transgender adults during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this research found that 25% of transgender adults experience food insufficiency in comparison to 8% of cisgender adults. And within that, 36% of transgender people of color experience food insufficiency in comparison to 13% of cisgender people of color.
Wow.
So we've always recognized that food apartheid specifically affects or disproportionately affects BIPOC folks, trans folks, and BIPOC trans folks. Our community pantry aims to serve our community members in a space that is free of stigma, that's culturally affirming, and is queer and trans competent. And another way that we really approach collective care is through a framework of mutual aid. So we recognize that people are our communities have the resources that they need. So we're able to sustain ourselves. We don't need to rely on large institutions to do that for us. So by approaching it through this lens, we really work with our community so they can understand their own collective power, and they can advocate for and attain the resources and anything else they might need to thrive.
And you hit on a lot there, Moses, because it's about stigma-free support, and that's really key, and helping to create a space where needs can be shared. So we're going to get into some of that, further along in the discussion. I guess Marisa, hearing this and understanding the way in which the community is challenged with the disproportionate impact, how does KeHE find a way to connect to community and also find a way to build that culture within the organization?
So before I get into that, Moses, those percentages are shocking. It's upsetting. Thank you for sharing that and bringing that to this conversation. So from KeHE in an organizational standpoint, when COVID hit, we distribute food to grocery stores. So if you can all imagine, it may be a little traumatic for some folks, the grocery stores during COVID, when people were panic buying and shelves were empty, and it was just chaos for individuals and for the company as well. And in that space, I remember feeling helpless. What can I do? I know that there's a need, but what does that solution look like? And because we know that brown and Black communities are disproportionately affected by food insecurity, that isn't a surprise, right? And when I thought about what was within my circle of control, I realized that I didn't have to go outside of the four walls of warehouses to reach that demographic. So what we've done to just demonstrate a culture of care is we've created employee appreciation purchasing event for our warehouse workers. So at these events, we just very intentionally come to serve our warehouse workers and give them a chance to buy KeHE's products at a very deep discount. KeHE, as a distributor, we carry all sorts of food, from frozen ice cream to breakfast bars to baking goods to specialty foods, household items, beauty products. So what's nice is when we have these events, we have a wide range of what's available for the employees to get. So that has been really cool to see. And we've had two at our Romeoville warehouse, and just the impact of that is is the best part for me. Like just seeing people just happy and smiling and just like feeling that love that we're trying to provide for them is really nice. Like for example, at those events, there would be workers who would go and shop the lines, and I would see them run out and call their wives to say, hey, like they have all these items for us, like what could we use at the house? And it's just really cool to be able to build community with those folks and help them in a way that I know is meaningful. And really, like the best part of that is we're getting healthy, nutritious food like into the warehouse workers' hands and their families.
Thank you, Marisa. It is amazing when you can see the impact of the work that's happening and to feel connected to the individuals within the organization. And it's so interesting. I think that, you know, a lot of times in a big company, folks get kind of siloed in their different departments. And it is something like this that allows people who wouldn't have a reason to interact with one another to be able to come together. And I don't know if I'm understanding, it isn't only the warehouse workers that could buy that, but it's anyone who wants to come, right? It's a kind of an open opportunity for all employees and members of the group to come together. Is that right?
So it's intentionally meant for the warehouse workers. That is like the prime focus of it. But to kind of help with the culture of serving, we opened it up to all teams at our corporate office to come help us volunteer, run the event, set it up, clean it, break everything down. And we do allow the volunteers to come purchase as well. But really, we want to just keep it centric to our warehouse workers.
Okay, that's good to understand. And, you know, really a lot of times it's how do you take these ideas and operationalize them? Like make it, like activate the idea into a way that makes an impact and brings people along with it. Because it's not only what you're distributing, but the, you know, the minds you're changing, I think, or the influence that you have. So I guess, you know, scaling up ideas like that to make them work is something that I want, you know, folks who are here to understand a little bit more the way you've both been able to do that. So, you know, scaling inspirational ideas or services and solutions, how do we do that to really shift the system? I know, speaking of grocery stores, you know, we work with a national grocery chain to reduce wasted food and improve food recovery, and piloting efforts in Chicago that we have to, you know, we can do it at one grocery store or three grocery stores, but how does it scale to the scores of, you know, 20, 40, 60 stores in Illinois and hundreds across the country? You know, a couple keys that I've realized is, you know, understanding the importance of capacity of the community organizations and how do you set them up for success, and really, you know, how can we find ways, this what we're actively working on right now is, you know, systemizing the partnering process. So you find an organization like KHE, and if it's connected to a community group, you know, how do you find what's the best fit using questionnaires or Google Forms? I'm open to ideas others have, but, you know, really strategizing the best fit is key. And then on the organizational side, you know, and that's why I was so excited to have Moses here, you know, and we've learned it together at the Chicagoland Food Sovereignty Coalition, you know, in what way can we build tools to increase efficiency and then share best practices across the network of mutual aid groups, or, you know, spreading knowledge and access to others is a way to sort of expand the capacity on one end and expand the understanding of how to, of the importance of linking that with a big organization like yours, Marisa, or even scaling it down. So, you know, with that in mind, how have you strategized and prioritized, you know, on the operational level, minimizing and redirecting wasted food?
So I think the first aspect of that is bringing the humanity piece back into these conversations. I feel that at the corporate level, sometimes it's just a general ledger accounting line. Okay, how much have we wasted? And that upset me at first. I had trouble accepting that that's how we were looking at food waste. So I intentionally went to the warehouses to see, okay, this is $100, but what does that look like in cases and in meals? So that's the first way that I would say I've been able to strategize that. Just kind of get everyone on the same level playing field. Like, hey, we're wasting food and we don't want to be. A resource I'd like to share is from the Environmental Protection Agency's website. There is a food recovery hierarchy, and on that it shows different tiers to prevent food waste. The top levels of that hierarchy are the best ways to prevent and divert wasted food because they create the most benefit for the environment, society, and economy. So at my company, I've been able to help replicate that hierarchy for KHE's operations to help support our food recovery goals. At my company, I work in the supply chain department, so I'm able to help influence each tier of the hierarchy, from source reduction by working with the systems team to have optimal system settings so that we're not buying more than we have a home for, all the way down to the least preferred option, which is anything that ends up in the dumpster that's been damaged and is unedible. So I think that, one, it's bringing the passion and just having a voice at that table to say, hey, we really need to look at this from at the bare minimum a human level, and just understand that humans are hungry and food is essential for life. And then after that, take that passion to get just researched models on how to do it well and implement that at your company. So with that, I want to just stress, I think it is so important for folks to get into STEM careers so that you have a seat at the table where decisions like this are being made. Because I didn't plan to end up at KHE. I really went to school to be a pilot, and I realized that that wasn't for me. But I am so, so glad that I'm here, because I really feel like it's a bit of my purpose to be advocating for just collective community care. Because really, when it comes to wasted food, you have to be intentional about it. It can't be a hand out, it has to be a hand up. You have to be able to elevate communities so that you're meeting grassroots where they are and helping them elevate what they're doing and working on. Moses, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think passion is definitely one of the, starting points for for getting people on board with food sovereignty work. Um, I would even extend that to say, solidarity. For me, it's just how do we, get people involved, and how do we build capacity around this? For me, it's a balance of solidarity and also just networking. So finding people that are also about this movement, and being able to connect with them so you can have knowledge shares, so you can support each other, and build up on each other. For those of you that attended the Chicago Food Sovereignty Coalition panel on Wednesday, that's one of the main reasons that Brave Space has been able to scale up, is because we've been able to make great connections with a group like that. We're able to scale up our power because we have 30 plus mutual aids backing us up and saying, hey, this is the problems that we're facing in our community, and this is what needs to be done in order to really meet the needs of the people. And I would say, Brave Space has also been super fortunate, because we've been able to scale up specifically our pantry programs significantly in the year that I've been here. So we've been able to do this because, firstly, we receive so much support from our community members. In fact, the reason that we started scaling up our pantry services through our pantry partner network is because when we first started our then called Crisis Pantry, we received so many in-kind donations that we had to store excess supplies with our friends at 33rd Ward Working Families on Montrose. When we also had so many community members ask about the supplies that are being stored there that the folks at 33rd Ward started distributing them out on a regular basis. And from there, word just quickly spread through the community. So with this, we recognize this as an opportunity to better serve folks beyond our office in Hyde Park. And we started reaching out to other organizations across the city. And as a result of those efforts, we have been able to scale up to 4 pantry partner sites, a pantry site at our home office, and a grocery delivery program that prioritizes grocery delivery to immunocompromised, elderly, and disabled folks. We've been truly fortunate in the sense that we have and continue to receive so much support, and we're able to continue operating at the scale that we're at right now. And also, in full transparency, we're also able to sustain and expand our reach because we receive so much community support. And we've also been able to build staff and acquire resources that allow us to apply for and receive grants from major donors and funders. So really, we've been able to just like, maintain or sustain the demand that we're at right now because we're also able to purchase in bulk from wholesalers across the city. And we realize that because we as an organization have access to a lot of capital, we want to be more intentional with our purchasing and where this money goes to in our communities. So this year, we're trying to be more intentional with our purchasing by creating partnerships with local BIPOC growers and vendors, because like I mentioned, we recognize that we have the ability to redistribute capital to businesses and communities that have historically been, resource and capital deprived.
I love it. I'm always like wanting to cheer when Moses talks because it is so cool how naturally this last year has created such movement and traction with Brave Space Alliance really being able to access capital and get it out to where it can make so much of a difference. And looking at it, not only addressing the needs of the community and really understanding needs. I think a lot of us who were present and aware of, let's just say, government approved food boxes that maybe didn't have food most appropriate for those who were hungry and had to accept the boxes and maybe deal with issues related to their health and eating the dairy or drinking the dairy that was there. But it even goes to, I was so fortunate to go to a pantry that's one of the Brave Space Alliance partners, Rincon Family Services, which is in my community of Avondale. And they understand the needs and the preferences of those that they serve. And so much of this is not geographically specific. Moses, they mentioned, Brave Space Alliance is in Hyde Park, yet these pantry partners are across the city and they're serving a variety of organizations and community members. It really kind of hitting the point of how do we be intentional about how we're helping, but then also be intentional about how we're buying so that we're building strength and building power within the communities. And, when I say circular economy, it sounds like just a generic business term, but, it's about inequity being shifted and opportunity being shifted to where we can make a difference by where we buy from, who we support, and how we drive access and really connect the dots. I think community access points was a term that Marisa and I discussed, really figuring out how these can be linked together. So, just to get a little bit deeper and more specific on your programs themselves, maybe Moses, if you want to first speak to understanding, who you serve and what types of food are donated, and maybe since Brave Space Alliance has scaled, how that's different in one area or another, or within one community or another.
Yeah, definitely. So to give a little more context on the way that our community pantry works, so like I mentioned before, we have our pantry site at our home office. We have our pantry or grocery delivery program, and then we have what's called the Pantry Partner Network. So the Pantry Partner Network currently consists of 4 different organizations across the city of Chicago. So we have Rincon Family Services up in Avondale. We have Task Force in the West Garfield Park neighborhood, which also serves as a Vogue school and an after-school drop-in program. We have Project Vita in the Lawndale neighborhood, which also provides HIV services and counseling. And we have Renaissance Family Services, which is also in Garfield Park, and they're a rapid rehousing program. So we partner with these organizations intentionally because all of these organizations have built up reputations for themselves in their respective neighborhoods. So these are places that people are familiar with. They know that they can come here for resources, and they know that they will be served in a culturally affirming and just overall competent manner. So that's why we're super intentional about who we partner with and where we work. But in terms of how we get the specific resources that these different communities needs, it's all about listening to the community. It's about, really taking in that feedback and just understanding what the community needs. So, we fully recognize that marginalized folks are experts of their own lived experiences, which makes them more than well equipped to advocate and organize around the quality and type of resources/care that they need for themselves and their neighbors to thrive. So when developing our pantry programs, we aim to make our community members a key part in every operational aspect, from the locations that we work in, the types of food that we procure and redistribute, and how we redistribute it. And we really do this by hiring folks that have experience organizing in the communities that we work in, creating opportunities for folks to give feedback and refine the way that our programs operate, and letting community members take charge in the day-to-day operations of our pantry programs. To us, this process continuously allows us to iterate and ensure that we're always capturing and meeting the needs of the many different communities that we work in. And then when it comes to like soliciting donations from our donor base, we're very intentional about what we need and what we're asking for. So we ask for specific items, and we're very clear about the items that we will not take. So for example, across the whole board, we've had our community members ask for fresh produce, because historically what's usually in pantries is canned or just like frozen stuff. And for many folks, this really isn't an option, because for canned stuff specifically, it's usually higher in sodium, and it usually has like a taste that many people don't prefer. So when we took in this feedback, we were able to find a partner that provided us with fresh produce boxes on a bi-weekly basis. So from here, we were able to just like really see how this worked for one site, and we were able to expand it across the board. So we're able to get fresh produce across all of our different sites. And also, we're not shy in refusing resources from an organization if they don't align with our missions and value positioning. We've come across situations where we've actually refused donations from an organization because they were undermining and fighting the organizing efforts of their unionized staff. So for us, this just doesn't work for the way that, this doesn't align with race-based principles and strategic priorities. We want to make sure that everything that we do in our pantry programming is always reflective of, supporting the community and is aligning with what, people need and are asking for.
I love it. I mean, it's on so many levels of understanding how to support within the community and really, like you said, provide opportunities to marginalized individuals and go beyond food. I love when Oak Park River Forest Food Pantry changed their name to Beyond Hunger, because I already understood that. But that, to me, beyond hunger, beyond food, that's what we're talking about. We are talking about people, Marisa, like you said. And so how do we help each other? And being able to just get it done larger is that's obviously where my head's always going. So at KeHE, how is your food recovery program? How does that operate, and what foods do you find that you have available to distribute, and have you found a way to connect it to needs with the community organizations you partner with?
So at KeHE, like I mentioned, we have a lot of products, and it goes from dry to refrigerated to frozen. I would say that there are some barriers in being able to distribute that all as intentionally as I would like to see. And a lot of that comes down to like the storage space at our donation partners. But within what I'm able to like influence, what I'd really like to see more is more community access points. And I think that those have to be very intentional. I also think that more research needs to be done into food system mapping, and just be very clear on where our food deserts and food swamps are, and ideally in proximity to our warehouse distribution centers. That way, the food that comes out of those centers in the form of donation can reach the people who need it most in the areas that they need it. And yeah.
It's so funny, because as much as we did plan ahead for what we were going to be talking about, I did not know you were going to say that, and it's perfect, because it brings me to something that Annika, who's with us, who's part of the Chicagoland Food Sovereignty Coalition, and she's an amazing student at DePaul University that we've had the pleasure to, many of us, know and work with. If you don't mind putting in the chat the Elevating Community survey. Annika, so look, you guys go ahead and look in the chat. That'll be placed there. And what's happening, speaking of mapping, the city of Chicago is working on an initiative. It's not really the city, I guess, technically. The Natural Resources Defense Council has a program called Food Matters, and it's a nationwide program. The city of Chicago is part of the Great Lakes cohort. And so cities are banding together to understand better how to map and figure out the flaws and gaps in the food system, and then fix them or connect the dots. And so what we're trying to do is really understand which community organizations are where, so that we can help. So and that's, when I say we, I guess partly I'm referring to my own company, Brightbeat, but also the Wasted Food Action Alliance and other organizations, really trying to work together on mapping and asset mapping or community mapping, overlaid with opportunities for food, KHE being a point on a map. And like you said, what's the closest location where an organization could receive food from you and redistribute? The same thing goes on the grocery level. And with 7 Generations Ahead, who's a nonprofit partner of ours, we worked on a research project looking at grocery store warehouses, and just the diverse success of, meaning some warehouses are not really successful in their food recovery partnerships, and some are. And so the way in which we can better map this and resolve these problems ourselves and connect organizations who have the capacity, but then also figure out where there lacks capacity. And that's the infrastructure that we need to focus on building, because it's better for everyone. And so I guess to Ann Stapleton's question, the mapping efforts that are going on in Chicago, in addition to what I just mentioned, which is, again, a national initiative of a food rescue assessment, the city of Chicago is working on. The Wasted Food Action Alliance and Alliance for Health Equity have initiated some healthcare organizational mapping. And additionally, within the Chicagoland Food Sovereignty Coalition, I mentioned the work that some students at DePaul have been leading really since the pandemic, and the Chicago Food Policy Action Council initiated a lot of convenings around the challenges of cold storage and other infrastructure issues. Cold storage mapping, mapping food pantries, mapping farmers markets, and really, again, understanding if there's opportunities to glean, where and how can we get them. And we're doing also with the Chicago Sustainability Task Force, looking at events and facilities and where there are potentially food donation opportunities. So those are 3 different examples of mapping that's happening. And I'm looking at the time, and I don't want to be too chatty here. So I want to move on to community needs, which really relates to the other piece that Marisa mentioned, and Moses also spoke to, when it comes to really understanding the individuals being served and how can we best understand what their needs are. So how do neighbors share their needs, free of stigma? Moses, how does Brave Space Alliance identify the needs? If you spoke about the Pantry Partner Network, is there any specific outreach, or are there any, kind of best practices that Brave Space Alliance has learned over the last year?
Yeah, for us, it's really just like building trust with the different communities that we work in. And I think that's also just a really key part of including people from the community in your operations. Because, when people come to one of our pantry spaces, if they see someone behind the line that they recognize as a neighbor, as opposed to someone from some sort of corporate entity that's just stopping in for a couple hours, they'll be more likely to feel more comfortable in that space, and they'll also be more likely to, talk about not only how their day is going, but what resources they might need, or maybe they'd like to see this next time. So we really value those conversations with our community members, because it just really allows us to ensure that we're fully meeting their needs every time.
Yeah, trust. and really understanding that you're being heard, giving someone a voice and actually listening, doing something with it that comes back to them. I don't know if Marisa, you have any points to add on the community needs piece.
I think from like KH's perspective, being a large distributor, there's challenges, even though there's good intentions to do it well. For example, because the donations are so large scale sometimes, I'm very mindful of when a donation is more harmful than it is helpful. For example, like if there's like a large surplus of something that a community doesn't need, and we kind of come in and say, hey, like we have this awesome donation for you. Moses, it kind of touches on what you were talking about, and having to be in that place to refuse a donation because um, it's just not a need of that community. So I think that that's where a lot of my work is headed, to figure out how to understand that better so that donations are just distributed well and elevating.
Thank you so much. And I want to get to a question in the chat, but first I want to call out an amazing individual. And I might be right saying that he was one of the initiator, one of the core founders. What would you say, that founding members of CIFPAC, the Chicago Food Policy Action Council, that has hosted this event? Danny Block mentioned in the chat, for those who aren't reading it, a group of us, including CIFPAC and other partners, have been coming together to create, you can read it now, online food access maps. And Wesleyan at IIT, I know Professor Ashton has also done work, and QAMP, the Chicago Urban Agriculture Mapping Project. Thank you, Danny, for sharing that link in the chat. As Jen Nelson pointed out, that's the thing. There's all these different maps. How do we come together to understand? And that intersection, as Julie mentioned from the US EPA, Julie mentioned the need to intersect nutrition needs and accessibility. And as far as nutrition goes, there was a question that Terrence mentioned here. Let's see if I think that it's going to be placed up on the screen. I don't want to give it away, but speaking on nutrition and what that means for different communities, we have 2 minutes left. So just in 30 seconds or a minute, Moses, if you could speak to the way that you've addressed nutrition across Brave Space Alliance's pantries.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's kind of like for me at least, it's a bit of a tricky question because when we think of like nutritious foods, we always think of like whole produce, whole grains and whatnot, which, they are more nutritionally dense than other like prepackaged foods and whatnot. But for me, it's kind of a tricky question because we kind of have to balance that with the needs of the community. So for example, like at one of our pantry partners, Renaissance Social Services, they work with a lot of folks that are houseless or don't have access to kitchen facilities to cook whole products like whole produce or whole or like rice and stuff like that. So for them at that moment, items like prepackaged or ready to eat foods that are typically a little more processed are things that are more easily accessible to them and more easy for them to eat. So honestly, it just really goes back to just understanding the needs of the different communities that you're working in, and just trying to provide a resource that works for them in that moment. Because for us, we understand that people that access our community pantry services, are having trouble accessing just like food all around. So we want to give them something that can sustain them in that moment, and hopefully by building a stronger relationship with these different communities, we can find ways to introduce more or just like increase access to more nutrient dense foods.
Kind of going on that too, I think that there has to be a layer of like cultural relevance too, because nutritious could be quinoa, but if this community has never been introduced to quinoa before, that doesn't really fit within like what would be nutritious for them, is what I'm thinking.
I think you're right. Is understanding the kind of diversity of need and really figuring out a way to tackle it at scale. Since we're at time, I want to address in the chat here, Deepa Gupta has done such amazing work leading the Community Food Navigator and really leading the process of building that. Unfortunately, we had a meeting and I was unable to attend your session yesterday, Deepa. I'm planning to watch the recording, but I think that what it represents is this need and desire to have participation in mapping yourself, categorizing, like Danny said, mapping what you need or mapping what you have, trying to bring together groups that can work together and addressing relevant concerns that folks have, because privacy is a real issue. The surveys that we've shared here today, and Annika, if you don't mind posting them one last time so people could go ahead and complete information. If you complete any, fill out a survey here, it will be private. And that's an issue, is that how do we make sure that folks are cared for in their participation, and in order to get the most out of these programs. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. As Steph said in the chat, if you want to go ahead and put questions further in, this chat actually remains open, I learned. So even when this is over, we'll be able to see what was in there. So please, we'll make sure to look at it, and you can use the surveys to further this conversation. What we're hoping to do is have further conversations through the Wasted Food Action Alliance, possibly also through a convened group that Danny Block was a part of for many, many months, that CIFPAC has convened. So basically the short point is we're keeping this conversation going. We want to help further this work, and that was the point of being here today. So I can't thank you all enough. Marisa, Moses, you inspire me. All of you who are here, even though I don't know who you are, we're really happy that you took the time. So enjoy the rest of the summit, everyone. CIFPAC can't thank you enough for your role in this. And to everyone who's working on strengthening the food system, thank you, and hope to build partnerships together. Cheers.
Well,
Thank you.